The value of a $200 birthday cake? For Clara, it was the price of heartbreak. She had spent her entire life sacrificing for Elena, but love and sacrifice couldn't buy the bond they once shared. Everything collapsed in one night. A tear-filled phone call, long-standing conflicts flaring up into a storm, and cruel words were spoken. The family tragedy reached its peak with an irrevocable decision. Can a mother endure such a loss? Or will this be a wound that never heals? Join me in hearing this true story of love, sacrifice, and unforgettable pain. Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. My name is Clara. I'm 65 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. I have asked myself many times, why do I do all these things for my daughter? Why do I set aside my own interests, abandon my own dreams, just to focus on a child who now seems like I mean nothing to her? The answer is love. A love that I thought was unconditional. A love that I imagined would be reciprocated with appreciation, at least once. But today, everything has changed. Elena, my beloved daughter, is 45 years old. I am not the kind of mother who enjoys throwing parties, but this year, I wanted to give her a special birthday. Something that would remind her of the sacrifices I have made for her all these years. I told myself, this is the only opportunity I have to do something wonderful for her, even if it's just a birthday cake. I spent an entire week preparing, but I didn't tell anyone. I wanted everything to be a perfect surprise. I didn't want to tell David, Elena's husband, because I knew he wouldn't understand. Every time I do something for Elena, he laughs it off and tells me I spoil her too much. But I don't care. I will still do this for my daughter. I found a famous bakery, hoping it would please her. The cake wasn't cheap. It cost $200. For me, that's quite a lot of money. But I thought about the happy look on my daughter's face when she received it. I've made many sacrifices in my life, but I've never thought about the money I've spent. I only think about Elena, about what I can do to make her feel loved. When I arrived at the bakery, I stood inside for a moment, admiring the beautifully decorated cake. At that moment, I thought about the years that had passed, the hard days when I worked tirelessly to provide her with everything. She never knew about the sleepless nights I spent, just so I could save a little money to send her to school, to give her a better future. But would she ever understand those sacrifices? When the cake was handed to me, I felt a sense of pride. This was the gift I was giving her, to let her know that I always remember and love her, even though everything seems to have changed. At that moment, I still hoped that things would be different, hoping that my daughter would understand what I had done for her. When I arrived at Elena's house, my heart raced. I had a strange feeling, as if something was waiting for me. I parked and got out of the car. The house still looked just as I remembered. It was the house I had helped my daughter buy with all my heart, with all the money I had. I paid off the mortgage, thinking that at least she would appreciate that. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed in the quiet, like a bell, signaling that something was coming. The door opened, and Elena stood there, as if she had been waiting for me. But her expression wasn't one of joy or expectation. It was cold, even unpleasant. She looked me up and down, not smiling, not offering the warm look I had imagined. I handed her the cake, trying to keep a smile on my face. Happy birthday, my dear. This is the cake I picked out just for you. I thought it would make you happy." She looked at the cake indifferently, then turned to look at me. After a moment, she placed the cake on the table, not lifting it, not saying a word of thanks. $200? She muttered, her voice full of disdain. "Do you think this will change anything?" Her words stunned me. This cake, I had put so much effort into preparing it for her, yet it seemed worthless in her eyes. She didn't take it, didn't even look at it. Does everything I've done mean nothing? I tried to control the anger building inside me. "You don't need the cake, Mom. What I need is the $50,000 you promised to send me. Do you know, I'm about to lose everything. My company is about to go bankrupt, and you still haven't sent enough money." Her words were like a bucket of cold water thrown in my face. $50,000. Money I had promised to help her maintain the business she had started. I had used everything I had to help her, so she could begin an independent life. But now, all I received was constant complaints. I felt suffocated. A whole year of working nonstop, a lifetime of sacrifices for my child, now amounted to nothing. I had paid off the mortgage for the house she was living in, helped her countless times. But all she saw was a mother who couldn't solve all her problems. It felt like I was a burden to her. "But I've paid off the house loan, Elena. I've done everything," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. But my words seemed like nothing, like a drop in a full cup, meaningless to her. Elena shook her head, her gaze cold, even with a hint of disgust. "Don't you understand? That doesn't matter? Do you think this $200 cake can solve anything? You don't understand what I need." My heart ached like never before. Her words were like a slap to my face. I had sacrificed so much, yet she saw me as a burden, a useless person who could no longer help her. But what I couldn't bear was what she said next. "I think the only thing that would make me happy is if you disappeared. If you died." Those words I could never forget. It was such a shock that I couldn't speak. Could she really say that to me? The girl I had raised, who I had sacrificed my entire life for. How many times had I dreamed of a day we could be together? But now, everything was shattered. My whole world collapsed in an instant. That feeling, that pain, I can't describe it in words. I turned and walked away, saying nothing. It was as if everything that had just happened was a bad dream. The $200 birthday cake still sat in the car. No one cared about it. I drove home, my heart empty. My daughter, the one I loved most, had now become a stranger in my eyes. But I also understood that, at this point, I couldn't keep living for her. I needed to find myself again, to save myself from this blind sacrifice. After leaving Elena's house, I drove home feeling nothing but a terrifying emptiness. Everything around me seemed to be waking up, yet I felt nothing. The $200 birthday cake, the gift I had carefully chosen, had now become a meaningless symbol. I couldn't understand why everything had turned out like this. Was I wrong for always giving everything to my daughter? What did I do wrong? Or had I been blind to believe that love could solve everything? When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about Elena's harsh words. "You just need to die." Those words haunted me, choking my heart. They not only hurt me, but also made me feel like a useless mother. A mother who had sacrificed everything to raise a child who no longer recognized her worth. I had given her everything. For years, I worked tirelessly to provide for her so she wouldn't have to endure the suffering I once experienced. I withdrew my retirement savings, cut back on personal expenses to support her in her career and life. But all I received in return was coldness, endless demands, and never-ending dissatisfaction. I gave, but got nothing in return except disdain. The anger and pain I felt were beyond words. I felt betrayed, not in a loud, obvious way, not with a stab to the heart, but in a quiet betrayal, a deep calculation that I never saw coming. Elna saw me as an endless source of money, an ATM she could withdraw from at any time without facing any consequences. She saw me as a tool, a means to achieve her goals. And I hadn't realized that until today. I began to feel an empty void, an inexplicable confusion. For so many years, I lived for her. Every morning I woke up, I thought of Elena. Every night before I went to sleep, I thought about what I could do to help her. But now, all I got in return was contempt and indifference. I began to ask myself if I was still worthy of love. Was I still worthy of being seen as a person? Or was I just a tool for her to use? I sat in the quiet house, no laughter, no warmth, which I had once imagined when thinking about my family. I realized that my life had changed. I couldn't keep living in this endless cycle of sacrifice. I couldn't keep giving without receiving. I couldn't live a life just to satisfy the unreasonable demands of someone who didn't appreciate me. At that moment, I understood that the change had to start with me. I couldn't keep being the invisible mother, the mother who could only give but never receive. I had to do something to change. I couldn't keep giving without receiving. And I began to realize that I needed to have a life of my own. The next day, I called my lawyer. I had already prepared myself for this decision, but when I actually had to carry it out, I couldn't help feeling confused. I couldn't believe I was going to do this to my own daughter. But I knew this was something I had to do. This was the only way I could free myself from living for others without ever being loved or appreciated. "Hello, lawyer. I want to change my will," I said, my voice cold and determined. "I want Elena to no longer be the beneficiary." The lawyer was silent for a moment before speaking. "Have you thought this through? This is a big decision, and it could change everything between you and your daughter. If you cut all ties with Elena, are you ready to face the regret later?" I thought for a moment. Truly, I had thought it through. I couldn't keep living in this state. I had sacrificed everything, but now I realized that I, myself, was the one who needed saving. I couldn't live just for someone who didn't appreciate me. I've thought about it carefully. I need to change, and I don't want Elena to be the beneficiary anymore. "All right," the lawyer replied, his voice calm. "I will carry out this change for you, but I advise you to prepare yourself. It won't be easy, and after this, you won't be able to go back." I hung up the phone, feeling an oddly refreshing sense of relief. A part of me wanted to cry, but another part felt free. Finally, I could escape this endless cycle. Finally, I could live for myself, even though I might have to endure loneliness. After that call, I decided to do things I had forgotten over the years. I had given up my personal interests, my own dreams, all for my daughter. But now, I needed to start over. I needed to find myself again. One of the things I had always dreamed of was learning to paint. But for all these years, I couldn't do it because I was too busy taking care of the family, of Elena. Now, I didn't want to live with regret anymore. I decided to enroll in a painting class. This wasn't just about learning a new skill. It was about learning to love myself. to do the things I truly loved without worrying about others. On the first day of my painting class, I felt very nervous. It felt like I was beginning a new journey, a new life. I sat at the drawing table, picked up the brush, and started painting. The feeling was amazing. I didn't have to worry about other people's problems, didn't have to endure anyone's demands anymore. I only had to focus on creating the pictures I wanted. After a few weeks of attending the class, I began to feel like I was being reborn. The new friends I made in the class not only helped me learn to paint, but also helped me realize my own worth. They didn't know what I had been through, but their care and warmth made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't have to live just for others. I had the right to live for myself, to chase my own dreams. That day, when I decided to sit down and call my lawyer, I didn't think my life would change so quickly. One phone call, one decision, and everything suddenly became clear. My heart, at that moment, felt like it was tightening in chaos, but a part of me felt relieved. It seemed as if I had just made the most important decision of my life. The first step on a path I never thought I would dare to take. People must have thought I was an unconditional, self-sacrificing mother. That's true, at least, until now. I had sacrificed everything. My youth, my interests, my personal dreams, all to take care of the family, especially Elena. Every day, I devoted all my time, energy, and mind to working and taking care of my child. I withdrew from my retirement fund, worked more, trying to make up for past shortcomings. I wasn't a perfect mother, but I did my best. Yet now, I had to face the harsh reality. All those sacrifices held no value in my daughter's eyes. Elena had become a stranger, a person who saw me only as an endless source of money. All those years of love, those sacrifices, had now become burdens, demands that I could no longer meet. When I think of Elena, I can't help but remember the times when we were close. The years I proudly watched my daughter grow up, learn, and mature into an adult. But now, I only see calculation, exploitation, and ingratitude. What I received after all I had given was coldness, even harsh words. You just need to die. I couldn't accept that. The feeling of betrayal wasn't easy to bear, but those words, they cut everything off. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had no role in my daughter's life anymore. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was just an invisible shadow, an ATM always ready to withdraw money. That evening, I sat in my quiet house. I looked around and couldn't recognize where I was living. My house, the house I had worked so hard to build from nothing, now felt empty. Every corner of this house once held beautiful memories, hopes for a warm and happy future for the family. But now, those hopes were just a distant dream. There was nothing left, only emptiness. And then I made my decision. I couldn't keep living in this vicious cycle of sacrifice. I couldn't keep living for Elena. I couldn't keep giving without receiving. I had lost too much to continue living in her shadow. I needed to change. I needed to live for myself. The call with the lawyer wasn't easy. I still remember when I said those words. I want to change my will. Elena will no longer be the beneficiary. My voice wasn't trembling, but inside, a storm of emotions was rising. I knew this decision would affect not only me, but also the family, Elena. But I couldn't continue like this anymore. Have you thought this through? This is a big decision. If you do this, it will be hard to heal things later, the lawyer said, his voice full of concern. I hesitated for a moment. Clearly, I had thought it through. But perhaps I needed to face the truth that if I didn't do this, I would keep living in my own oblivion. I can't keep living like this. Elena needs to stand on her own. She needs to learn independence, I replied. The call ended, but the inner turmoil remained. But I knew that this was the right decision. I was so tired of trying to please others, of doing everything to satisfy Elena's demands without getting anything in return. I couldn't live in that exhaustion any longer. The next morning, I woke up and felt like I had regained a part of myself. I no longer had to live under the pressure of responsibility, no longer had to live in the shadow of unreciprocated sacrifice. I realized that my life wasn't a meaningless existence just to fulfill others. I went outside, took a deep breath, and felt the fresh air. For the first time in many years, I felt free. I no longer had to worry about pleasing anyone, no longer had to worry about helping others and forgetting myself. At that moment, I began to realize that I deserved to live a happy life. I signed up for a painting class, a dream I had forgotten long ago. In the past, I had given up everything to take care of the family. Now, I could do what I loved. The painting class wasn't just an artistic activity. It was my way of rediscovering myself, finding freedom, and learning to love myself. These classes, though not always easy, brought me an oddly peaceful feeling. I picked up the brush, felt each stroke, and gradually I realized that painting wasn't just about creating. It was a process of freeing my soul. I no longer had to worry about irrelevant things. I just needed to focus on what I loved. Gradually, I began to see changes in myself. I felt freer. Every morning when I woke up, I no longer felt exhausted from doing things I didn't want to do. I didn't have to think about others' demands anymore. Finally, I understood that this life was mine, and I had the right to decide what I wanted. I also began meeting new friends in the class. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I had been through, but their care for me made me feel like I wasn't alone. They saw me not as a tired mother or a forgotten woman, but as a woman finding herself, living a life that I truly wanted. Every day that passed, I felt stronger. This freedom wasn't easy to obtain, but I felt that I was walking the path of liberation. I no longer had to depend on anyone to feel valuable. I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I would continue living my life the way I wanted. I had done what I never thought I could do. And that was the first step in my journey to liberate myself. In the early days after my decision, I felt like I was in completely new territory. A land without unconditional giving, without blind sacrifice, and without Elena standing there with endless demands. But that didn't mean it was easy. Every morning I woke up, I felt the difficulty and pain I had to face. I never imagined I would have to live without Elena, but now I had done it. The decision to stop sending money to Elena, to stop opening additional credit cards for her, was a decisive step, but it was filled with insecurity. I had become so accustomed to supporting her, as if it were a part of my nature, an inseparable part of my role as a mother. But now, I understood that I couldn't continue living that way. She needed to understand that endless sacrifice would bring nothing but dependence. And I, the mother who had given everything, also needed the right to live my own life. One morning, I sat in my office, looking at my bank account. A feeling of both relief and confusion washed over me when I saw that the monthly transfers I had been sending to Elena no longer appeared. I no longer had to worry about whether she had enough money to pay the bills, whether she could continue to run her business, or whether she would need more money to pay off her debts. But that relief lasted only a brief moment. Immediately after, the questions flooded back. Had I done the right thing? Was I being too harsh in doing this? Was I truly ready to see her live without my support? Although I knew this was necessary, I still couldn't help feeling a little something in my heart as that decision became a reality. It was a huge change in my life. Every time I thought back to those old days when I lived only to help Elena, when I did everything to help her stand on her own, I felt a dull ache. I had sacrificed so much in my own life just to satisfy her. I had forgotten about myself. Still, I couldn't deny that there was a strong, decisive feeling in making this decision. It was the feeling of freedom, the realization that I deserved to live for myself, even though my daughter might never understand, even though she might feel betrayed. I had to continue on this path. I couldn't keep being the mother who only gives and never receives. After making financial changes, I started doing things I had never considered before. I no longer had to spend most of my time on Elena's calls, no longer had to worry about whether she had enough money to live. And in the meantime, my life began to slowly return to the things I had neglected. The next day, I decided to sell the car that Elena had always insisted I buy for her. A new, expensive car that she always believed she deserved. But I couldn't continue to nurture such a habit. She didn't understand that. While she might need that car, I saw it as a symbol of dependence. It was something I had unintentionally created over the years. Selling that car was not just a material break, but a significant spiritual decision. I wasn't just cutting off an asset. I was cutting off her dependence on me. During those days, I began to feel a shift in my mind. I started participating in volunteer activities, helping the elderly, people who, like me, had sacrificed their lives to care for their families, but had never had the opportunity to live for themselves. Meeting them, talking to them, I felt a strong connection with those who had once been like me. And this feeling made me feel lighter than ever. One afternoon, while I was working in the painting class, Elna called. She didn't call often anymore, but I still felt anxious every time I saw her name on the phone screen. This time, her tone seemed different, no longer filled with reproach or anger. "Mom, I've thought about it a lot. I know you did this because I need to stand on my own. But can you help me one more time?" Elena asked, her voice sounding almost like she was pleading. I didn't answer immediately. A mix of emotions surged within me. I knew she was trying to soften me, but I also knew that if I helped her again, I would fall back into the endless cycle I had been stuck in for so many years. I had never been able to refuse, never been able to turn a blind eye in the past, but this time, I had to do things differently. "I can't help you again, Elena," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "You have to take care of yourself. Be responsible for what you've caused." The coldness in my heart was indescribable. It wasn't a coldness of indifference, but a firm decision. A decision I knew would make Elena angry, would make her feel abandoned. But I understood that if I kept helping her, I would just keep fostering dependence and ingratitude. Elena didn't say anything more. For the first time, I felt a silence so heavy. But it was also the silence I needed to understand that I couldn't continue living for others. I couldn't live without a little something for myself. In the weeks that followed, I didn't receive any more calls from Elena. Every time I thought of her, I felt a little sadness, a little worry. But then, peace would envelop me. I no longer had to worry about whether she needed money, whether she could take care of everything on her own. I had done what I could. But now, I didn't have to do everything for her anymore. She had to stand on her own. During the evenings I spent painting, I began to feel a clear change in myself. No longer was there a sense of being bound. No longer was there a need to please anyone. I had found myself again, found the joy and freedom I had long abandoned. It wasn't freedom to do anything I wanted, but freedom to live for myself, to no longer sacrifice unconditionally. And even though Elena didn't understand, even though she might be angry with me, I knew I had done the right thing. Sometimes, true love isn't about giving everything without receiving anything, but about teaching the other person to stand on their own. And I would continue down this path, the path to rediscovering myself, the path I had forgotten for far too long. This life, in the end, is mine. How many times have I told myself that I wouldn't let myself drown in meaningless sacrifice? But that was a promise I never had the courage to keep. Until now, when I look back, I realize that change doesn't only come from grand decisions. It comes from small moments, from steps that I once thought were impossible to take. I can't remember how many times I've asked myself, am I being too harsh by stopping my support for Elena? But a part of me already knew, and I understand, that I couldn't continue living in the shadow of endless sacrifice. I had given too much without receiving anything in return. From the monthly transfers to opening credit cards, I had done everything for her. But that no longer meant anything. Every time I did that, I was just continuing to nurture her dependence, and I couldn't do that anymore. With every decision I made, I felt a little stronger. But it is undeniable that the pain and anxiety still lingered. Every morning I woke up, I felt a strange emptiness. No more pleading calls from Elena, no more worrying about whether she could overcome her struggles. Although I had severed the financial ties, it wasn't that I didn't care for her. That feeling still lingered in me like a ghost. A part of me still wanted to help her. But I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to live my own life. The first thing I realized was that I no longer had to worry about pleasing anyone. I had spent too much time and energy on others, and now I was learning to love myself. Painting, volunteering, or simply spending time for myself all became ways for me to rediscover the joy of living. I no longer had to live according to anyone's expectations, and that feeling was truly new. For the first time, I felt unbound by the responsibilities I had placed on myself all these years. The painting class became a place where I found peace. Every lesson, I started with a blank canvas, and gradually, it became a work of art reflecting the change within me. The lines on the canvas were not just simple drawings. They were expressions of the new, free life I was slowly creating. My first painting was just vague shapes, without clarity. But over time, my strokes became sharper, just as my soul began to clear. Each time I finished a painting, I felt like I had completed a part of my life. I no longer felt trapped in old decisions, no longer felt bound by a past I couldn't change. The paintings became symbols of my rebirth, and I had learned to enjoy each moment of it. But what surprised me the most was the change in my relationship with myself. Before, I always thought I had to take care of everyone around me, always had to put others' needs above my own. I had lived that way for so many years, thinking it was the best way I could do things, the way I could be loved. But now, I realize that self-love is the first step to fully loving others. One late afternoon, when I was painting in class, I suddenly realized how much I had changed. I no longer felt worried about whether Elena needed my help or whether she could stand on her own. I no longer felt guilty about not supporting her financially anymore. I had given too much, and now I was receiving freedom. The freedom I had never dared to imagine before. Although I had been working with volunteer activities for a while, I had never truly felt connected with the people I met until I met Lily. She is an older woman, but full of vitality. Someone who has gone through many hardships in life, yet still holds on to faith in love and optimism. Lily understands me. She once told me that in life, sometimes you have to know how to let go, to free yourself to find who you truly are. One afternoon, while we were walking in the park, Lily shared her experiences with me. She spoke about the times she had to leave relationships that no longer brought happiness, and she learned that life doesn't always unfold the way you want it. But when you give yourself the chance to live authentically, you will find happiness. Lily's story made me think a lot. She said, "Sometimes you have to let go of what no longer serves your growth, whether it's a relationship or a habit. Otherwise, you will forever be trapped in what's past." These words were like a wake-up call, and I understood that this was exactly what I needed to do. I had to let go of what no longer brought me happiness and start living for myself. The mornings no longer filled with worry about whether Elena needed money gave me more time to care for myself. The afternoons I spent walking in the park, feeling the warm sunlight shine down. I no longer felt loneliness or guilt. I had learned to accept that even though my daughter might be angry with me, I still needed to live my own life. The next day, while I was in my painting class, my phone rang. It was Elena. This time, I didn't feel fear or anxiety when I saw her name on the screen. I knew I wouldn't answer, and I didn't feel any regret. She would understand, or at least I hoped she would. Finally, I was able to turn off the phone and continue my work without feeling haunted or bound by unreasonable demands anymore. Each painting lesson wasn't just an art class, but a personal journey, an important step in rebuilding my life from scratch. My life since I cut off financial support for Elena has not been easy. Although I made a decision I believe is right, the anxiety still hasn't let go of me. The guilt follows me with every step I take, especially when I feel lonely. Elena's my daughter, and my love for her has always been present within me. Even though I decided to stop, the pain of not helping her makes my heart constantly fall into a state of conflict. I still vividly remember the first time I sat down with myself, reflecting on my decisions. Every time I looked at the painting I was working on, I remembered Elena and the sacrifices I had made for her. But it was also in those moments that I realized that blind sacrifice had only made me someone who couldn't live for herself. Elena needed me, but I couldn't continue to be the only one carrying everything for her. I had to live for myself, and only then could I truly help her. As each day passed, I gradually felt like I was stepping into a new life. I no longer had to worry about whether Elena needed my help. I didn't have to wait for her calls, nor feel stressed every time she asked for money. Although these calls had stopped, in my heart, a sense of sadness, a bit of regret still lingered. I love my daughter, and I know that no matter what I do, she will always be my daughter. But I also understand that sometimes loving someone is not about meeting all their demands, but giving them the freedom to grow and mature. However, life is not always easy. The feeling of no longer bearing responsibility for Elena left me with a strange emptiness. No more desperate calls, no more feeling like I had to always be there to help. A part of me felt free, but another part felt empty, as if I had lost my sense of purpose. I understand that this is a transition, but it's not easy to break away from what I had known. That day, when I was sitting in my painting class, I received a call from Elena. This time, the anxiety within me surged strongly. I had known that eventually she would find a way to reach out to me, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. Although I had decided not to help her anymore, seeing Elena's name on the phone screen still made me feel anxious. Was she really in trouble? Or was it just another plea for help? Would I be able to stand firm in my decision this time? I took a deep breath and decided to answer. Elena's voice came through, but this time it wasn't cold or accusatory as it had been before. Mom, I'm sorry. I really don't know what to do anymore. David and I are in serious financial trouble. You can't let your granddaughter end up on the street, can you? Her voice was full of desperation, as if she was trying to hold back her tears. It was something I had never heard before. Elena is a strong person, rarely showing weakness. But this time, the pleading in her voice made me feel like I was standing at a major crossroads in my life. But despite feeling sympathy for her, I couldn't go back on my decision. I had spent so many years living for others, living only to please others. But now, I no longer wanted to continue like that. I had helped Elena so much already, and without boundaries, she would never grow. No matter how heartbreaking, I knew I had to let her stand on her own. You have to take care of yourself, Elena. I can't help you again. You've had enough time to learn how to be independent, I said, my voice firm but tinged with sadness. You need to take responsibility for your life. I've helped you many times. Now it's time for you to stand on your own. On the other end of the line, I heard a long silence. Elena didn't say anything. And in that moment, I felt the anger, the disappointment. I could imagine her crying, feeling abandoned. But I knew that this decision was right. I couldn't continue being the mother who sacrifices unconditionally. I had taught her how to live independently, and if I kept helping, she would never learn this important lesson. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice hardening. Are you really abandoning me? You don't care about your granddaughter? Her words were like a knife cutting through my heart, but I couldn't change my decision. I love you, Elena, but I can't keep doing it for you. I've done everything I could. I want you to learn how to live independently, not rely on me. From now on, you have to take responsibility for your own life. The call ended in silence. I put the phone down and felt a heavy sensation in my chest. Although I didn't regret my decision, I still felt a deep sadness. I had loved her with all my heart, done everything for her, but at this point, I had to let her stand on her own. That didn't mean I didn't love her, but I loved her in the way she needed, by learning to live her own life. After that call, I didn't receive any more calls from Elena. In my heart, part of me felt relieved, but another part still worried about her. Although I had let go, I knew she would have to face difficulties, but those were the things she needed to grow. And even though it was heartbreaking, I had to continue living my life. That weekend, I participated in a volunteer activity, at an elderly care center where I helped older people who no longer had family to care for them. There, I met an elderly woman named Martha. She lived alone and had gone through many difficulties in life. She shared with me the years she had sacrificed for her family, but she also showed me that life isn't just about sacrifice, but also about the freedom to live for oneself. Martha's story made me reflect deeply. I had spent too much time living for others, forgetting myself. But now, I understand that I need to learn how to live for myself. Volunteering, painting, and sharing with people like Martha helped me find my purpose in life. I no longer had to worry about calls from Elena. Even if she was angry with me, I knew I had done the right thing. This life is mine, and I will live it my way, no longer living for anyone else. I can't let others' endless demands continue to control my life. And in the end, I have found myself again. The weeks following my decision to cut off all financial support for Elena passed relatively quietly, but they were not without moments that made me reconsider everything. My life seemed to have changed forever. From waking up without worrying about pleading calls from my daughter, to no longer having to hide in fear about whether she would overcome her difficulties. I felt relief, but also unease, a strange feeling when I no longer had to bear responsibility for someone else. I had made a decisive move, but I couldn't deny that every time I saw my phone buzz, a wave of anxiety rushed over me. It was a reflex I couldn't control, even though I had decided that I wouldn't answer those calls anymore. I knew I had done the right thing, but a part of me still felt like I was abandoning my daughter, turning my back on someone I had sacrificed my whole life for. Eventually, Elena couldn't stay silent for long. Although her calls didn't come as frequently, her messages still arrived regularly. At first, they were complaints, then promises of change, of doing better. But I no longer believed in those promises. A promise is just words without real action to back it up. One day, when I was sitting in my painting class, brush in hand, my phone suddenly vibrated. I don't usually answer the phone during class, but this time, I couldn't help but glance at the screen. Elena's name appeared. I hesitated, but then something urged me to pick up. When I heard her voice on the phone, I could sense the difference in her tone. No longer was there anger or coldness like before, but weakness, a plea. "Mom, I really don't know what to do anymore." Her voice cracked, as if all the suffering she had been through was compressed into that sentence. "David and I are really desperate. Can you help me one more time?" I took a deep breath. This time, it wasn't just a simple request. It was a true plea. Elena hadn't been able to resolve her financial issues on her own, and she needed my help. Guilt washed over me again, like a powerful wave, sweeping away the reasons I had initially decided. But even though I felt heartbroken, I couldn't allow myself to fall into this cycle again. This was the moment I had to stand firm and not go back on my decision to cut off all support. I gently but firmly responded, "Elena, you've had too many opportunities to change, to stand on your own. I can't keep helping you. You have to take care of your own life, and that can't come from depending on me." She didn't respond immediately. Only a long silence stretched between us, like a punch to my soul. Finally, her voice came through again, but this time it wasn't desperation. It was anger. "Are you really abandoning me? Don't you care about your granddaughter?" Elena snapped. Each word she spoke felt like a knife piercing my heart. I felt like I was being pulled into a deep hole where all the love I had for her was now being questioned. I loved her, but I couldn't keep helping her if it was just to satisfy unreasonable demands. And I understood that for her to grow, she had to face this truth, no matter how painful it was. You need to learn to stand on your own, Elena. I can't keep doing things for you. I love you, but I can't live my life for you. It's time for you to take responsibility for your own life, I said, my voice unwavering, filled with determination. The call ended. Elena didn't say anything more. Inside, I felt a strange feeling. Part of me felt relieved, but another part was filled with worry. Would she be able to understand me? Could she take care of herself? These questions lingered in my mind, but I knew I couldn't change my decision. The next day, I continued with my volunteer work. I didn't let the call affect my mood. While Elena was facing financial struggles, I found joy in helping others. I participated in volunteer activities helping the elderly, people who had no one to care for them, just like I had done before. This not only gave me comfort, but it also helped me rediscover my sense of purpose. I was no longer someone who lived for others, but I had started living for myself. With every painting I created, I felt that each stroke was a part of me. Every color, every line was a way of freeing myself from burdens I had carried for far too long. I was no longer living in Elena's shadow, no longer worrying about whether she needed me. I started to realize that I deserved to live the life I wanted, and no one had the right to stop that. A month after that call, I still hadn't received any calls from Elena. I didn't know what she was doing, whether she had overcome this difficult period or not. But I no longer worried. My life was no longer ruled by her calls and demands. I had done everything I could, and now I was able to spend time on myself, on the passions I had forgotten for so many years. The feeling of freedom isn't something easily obtained, but I slowly realized that this freedom was part of my growth. I no longer had to endure Elena's dependence, and most importantly, I had learned to live for myself. One evening, as I sat alone in my room painting and enjoying a warm cup of tea, I received a letter. It was a letter from Elena. Although I had decided not to continue helping her, this letter surprised me. In it, she didn't blame me anymore. Instead, she wrote, "Mom, I know you did the right thing. I can't change the past, but I will learn to stand on my own. I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. I will do what you wanted and try to become independent. Thank you for everything." That letter wasn't just Elena's change, but a sign that she had truly understood the lesson I had tried to teach her. While things couldn't change immediately, I believed this was the first step toward her maturity. And in my heart, a large part of me felt relieved. Finally, she had realized that dependence was not the way to grow. It had been weeks since the last time Elena and I met. My life now was quieter, with less worry. I no longer had to live in the fatigue of endless demands, no longer had to worry about whether Elena needed my help. I could enjoy every moment of life without taking on any responsibility that wasn't mine. Though there was still a bit of sadness and regret about the strained relationship with my daughter, I understood that this was a necessary change, one I had been waiting for all these years. But even though I had decided not to answer Elena's calls, even though I no longer had to worry about her financial issues, I couldn't deny that a part of me still couldn't feel completely at ease. A mother's love can't be extinguished just by tough decisions. Every time I thought about Elena, a sense of relief, but also deep pain, would creep into my heart. She is my daughter, and although I may have done what was right, I couldn't help but feel like I was abandoning her. Then one day, while I was sitting in my painting class, a place where I had found peace, I received a call. It wasn't a call from old friends, nor from any of the volunteer organizations I had been involved with, but a call from Elena. Her name appeared on the phone screen, and I couldn't help but feel a tightening in my chest. Everything I had prepared myself to face over the past few days suddenly resurfaced. Had she finally understood what I had done for her? Or was this just another plea for help? I hesitated, my hand unable to pick up the phone immediately. Eventually, I decided to answer. When I heard Elena's voice, I could clearly feel that this was not a call like the others. "Mom," Elena said, her voice different, no longer angry, no longer accusatory. "I'm sorry. I've thought a lot about what you've done. I know you've sacrificed a lot for me, and I was wrong not to recognize that. I want to meet you. Can you come to a cafe? We need to talk." Her voice was soft, no longer the coldness I had become familiar with. This made me feel like a wave had crashed over me. Elna had finally realized something I had been waiting for so long. It wasn't anger, it wasn't blame, but a sincere apology, an acknowledgement that she had been wrong. I agreed to meet her, not because I felt I needed to help, but because I felt this was the moment we needed to face each other, to address the unresolved issues that had lingered for so long. Although I had decided not to interfere in her life anymore, I knew that this confrontation would help me redefine my place in her life. When I arrived at the cafe, Elena was already sitting at a table, gazing out the window as if she were deep in thought. She seemed thinner, and her eyes no longer held the same pride they once did. When she saw me, she stood up and walked over to me, her eyes no longer cold like I had seen before. I realized that she had changed. "Hello, Mom," Elena said, her voice gentle, though still with a touch of shyness. "I know you're very angry with me. I didn't understand why you did this. But now, I understand. I'm sorry, Mom. You did everything for me, and I never realized that." I didn't say anything. I just sat down. Every word she spoke felt like a part of my heart was being torn apart. I always knew Elena would eventually understand, but I never imagined it would come so late. Yet, I listened, because I knew this was the moment we needed to face each other and make things clear. "I know you love me," Elena continued, her eyes showing remorse. "I thought you had to do everything for me. But now, I realize I was wrong. I've lived independence for too long, and you've taught me a hard but important lesson. Thank you for everything you've done, even though I know I don't deserve it." I looked at her, feeling both relief and deep pain. Finally, Elena had understood. She had realized that love wasn't about unconditional pampering, but about teaching, patience, and sometimes the tough decisions a mother had to make. "I'm not angry with you," I said, my voice softening. "I'm just sad that you didn't understand that I love you in a different way. I can't live my life solving all your problems. I've done everything I could, Elena. It's time for you to take care of yourself. That's how you grow." We both sat in silence for a long while. My words were no longer filled with reproach, but a reaffirmation that my love for her was still there, but not in the way she had thought. Elena had realized that she needed to take responsibility for her life. Even if she hadn't fully understood everything, I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that she had re-evaluated everything. "I'm sorry, Mom," Elena said again, her voice softer. "I will try to change, and I will do what you want. I will learn to be independent." When I heard those words, part of me felt more at peace. Finally, Elena had realized what I had done for her. And the most important thing was that she had understood that love is conditional giving, teaching, and growth, not endless dependence. As we stood up to leave, I felt lighter than ever. A conversation that had never been easy, but it was a big step forward in our relationship. Although I couldn't change the past, I knew my daughter had begun to learn the important lessons about life. She had realized the value of independence, and I hoped that from now on, she would no longer see me as an endless financial resource, but as a mother who only wanted what was best for her. I left that cafe with a strange feeling. I no longer felt like the woman torn between loving my daughter and living for myself. Elena had understood, and I had also come to understand that love wasn't about unconditional sacrifice, but about limited giving and teaching the other person how to stand on their own. Although life would never be easy, at least I knew that I had done the right thing. Since moving into her new apartment, Clara began to realize that her life had turned a new page. She no longer had to live in the shadow of unconditional sacrifice for others, no longer had to worry about financial demands from Elena, and no longer felt guilty every time she thought about what she had done and what she had not done. All of this made Clara feel a freedom she had never experienced before. How long had it been since she last took time for herself? How long had it been since she did things that she truly loved? These questions gradually became clearer in Clara's mind, and she realized that, finally, she deserved a life not bound by endless obligations. Clara no longer felt lonely as she had before. She found new joy in volunteering, helping lonely elderly people, those who were going through hardships in life without family by their side. From her conversations with them, Clara realized that, although she had spent years sacrificing endlessly for her family, she could now live for herself, no longer always being the one to give without receiving. From the mornings spent in a small cafe near her apartment to the evenings spent painting, Clara felt a new sense of freedom, no longer having to think about whether Elena needed help, no longer worrying about pleasing those around her. She felt like she was being reborn. The paintings Clara created were not just art. They were parts of life, long unfulfilled desires. Each painting was a step in the journey Clara had decided to continue, not for anyone else, but for herself. She began painting the landscapes and spaces where she wanted to live. Lush gardens, tree-lined paths, houses full of light, and most importantly, images reflecting the freedom and peace she had rediscovered. Each painting was a step toward rediscovering herself. Clara no longer felt that her life had lost meaning. In fact, she began to see that the years that had passed, though difficult and full of sacrifice, were essential parts of the person she was today. All the hardship had made her more self-aware, more clear about herself and life. For the first time in her life, Clara felt like she could breathe easily, a life no longer governed by the heavy responsibilities of family. No more expectations from her daughter, no more sacrifices without any return. She wondered, could this be called happiness? Perhaps happiness isn't a destination, but those moments we dedicate to ourselves, when we're not worried about things beyond our control, when we know how to let go of the past and live fully in the present. Moving into the new apartment was a big decision in Clara's life. She hadn't just sold the old house, but also sold the memories that had been tied to it. But this wasn't a surrender. Clara understood that this was a necessary step to rebuild her life. Although selling the house wasn't easy, she knew she needed space to start over. A space where she could live her way without being bound by the expectations and demands of others. The feeling of stepping into her new apartment was a special one. The walls were no longer limits, but the opening of a new world. Each room in the apartment contained things Clara had never had time to build. The plants she cared for, the paintings she made, and a space filled with light. Clara realized that this space wasn't just a place to live, but a place for her rebirth, a place where she could redo everything she had forgotten. Though this decision wasn't easy for Clara, she no longer felt guilty. She no longer thought she had to sacrifice for Elena or anyone else. Finally, Clara understood that love isn't unconditional sacrifice, but giving with limits. True love is when we love ourselves first, and from that place, we can love others fully. Starting a new life also meant Clara had to face questions she had avoided before. Did she want to go back to her old job, to what she had been doing all these years? Did she want to follow a career path or seek a new goal in life? Though there was no clear answer yet, Clara felt comfortable with that ambiguity. She understood that we don't always have all the answers immediately. What mattered was that she had the opportunity to find those answers, not for anyone else, but for herself. She decided to spend more time volunteering. Clara joined organizations helping the elderly, those who had no family left. Volunteering not only helped her feel valuable, but it also connected her with people in similar circumstances. Clara had spent too many years caring for others, but now she realized that she also needed care, time to nurture her own soul. One afternoon, when Clara was at a volunteer gathering, she met an elderly woman named Lily. Lily had lived independently throughout her life. Despite facing many challenges, she was strong, never yielding to difficulties, and had found happiness in helping others. Clara and Lily quickly became friends, and Lily shared with Clara that, even though life was hard, she always believed in the power of living authentically. Lily's stories helped Clara realize that life is not always easy, but when we live for ourselves and help others from the heart, that's what creates true happiness. Each day, each action, each decision Clara made became a step in her journey of rediscovering herself. On a quiet evening, when Clara sat in her apartment, looking out the window, she felt peace in her heart. Life was no longer as it had been, no longer filled with worries about Elena's unreasonable demands, no longer the feeling of guilt for not fulfilling duties. Clara knew she had chosen the right path, a path that would eventually lead her to a new horizon, a horizon filled with freedom and happiness, where she could live true to herself. A year had passed since Clara decided to cut off all financial support for Elena. Her life had undergone many changes, but one of the most noticeable changes was the way she saw herself. She was no longer the woman who only knew how to sacrifice for others, no longer the mother always worrying about her children while forgetting herself. Clara had found herself again through the painting she created, the volunteer work she engaged in, and the meaningful conversations with new friends she had made. Still, Clara could not escape the feeling of longing, for the days gone by. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, sitting by the window and gazing outside, she would think about Elena. She couldn't forget her daughter, even though she had severed financial ties. Elena was still her daughter, and though Clara sometimes felt she had done the right thing, a part of her heart still ached when thinking about her. But Claire understood that, without this change, neither of them would ever grow. What mattered was that Elena had recognized the value of independence, and Clara had done everything she could to help her daughter stand on her own. Even though Clara no longer had to worry about Elena's endless demands, she knew her daughter's life wasn't without challenges. News from friends and family indicated that Elena and David had moved to a smaller apartment, struggling with financial issues she had never faced before. Clara didn't know the details of their situation, but she knew that Elena was learning some important life lessons. One morning, while Clara was in her painting class, she received a letter from Elena's lawyer. At first, she didn't want to open it, thinking it was another financial request. But after seeing Elena's name on the envelope, she decided to open it. The letter wasn't like the ones she had received before. It wasn't a request for more money, but a heartfelt letter from Elena herself. "I know you will never forgive me for what I've done, but I still want to apologize to you," the letter began. "I didn't understand you when I was younger. I thought you did those things out of duty, out of obligation, but now I realize that you did everything out of love. You didn't just give me money, you gave me your whole life. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry for everything I made you go through." The letter continued, telling Clara about the hardships Elena and David were facing. She said that they were working hard to maintain their lives, and that, though it was difficult, she had learned that independence was the most important thing. Elena also wrote that she no longer saw Clara, as she had before, as a financial resource she could access at any time. Now, she understood that her mother's love wasn't pampering, but teaching, and sometimes the necessary harshness to help her grow. Clara could feel the change in every word Elena wrote. She was no longer the demanding daughter, but a woman standing on her own feet. Clara felt a relief like never before. She no longer felt like the only one who had to worry about Elena. Her daughter's maturity, though late, had brought Clara a sense of peace she had never had. The letter ended with a heartfelt thank you. "I want to thank you for everything you've done. I promise I will do everything to not disappoint you again. I love you, and I will live a life that you can be proud of." After reading the letter, Clara couldn't control her emotions. She felt a deeper connection with her daughter than ever before. This wasn't an immediate forgiveness, but it was the first step toward healing the wounds, toward mending the misunderstandings between them. Clara knew that Elena hadn't fully understood all the sacrifices she had made, but at least she had recognized the important things in life. A month later, Clara decided to write a reply to Elena. In her letter, Clara not only expressed her love for her daughter, but also reminded her of the important values that life had taught both of them. Clara wrote that she didn't regret what she had done, and that she never wanted her daughter to live independence. "You are the only one who can change your life, Elena. I'm just the one standing beside you, supporting you when needed. I love you, and I always believe that you will become the person I've always hoped for," Clara wrote. Although she had not yet met Elena face to face, Clara felt a sense of liberation in her heart. She no longer felt like the only one shouldering everything. Elena's letter had helped her realize that her daughter had grown up, that she had learned the important lessons Clara had tried to teach her. Though the process was not entirely complete, Clara knew that no matter how many challenges and difficulties lay ahead, both of them had crossed an important milestone. The next day, Clara decided to visit a park near her apartment, where she often took walks on weekends. She felt a sense of lightness in her heart, as if all the anxieties from before had been cleared away. She no longer felt imprisoned by the expectations of others, no longer guilty about her decisions. Finally, Clara understood that she deserved to be loved and live for herself. As she sat on a bench in the park, Clara gazed out at the horizon, where the evening sunlight cast a golden glow on the clouds in the sky. She smiled, proud of the journey she had been through, of what she had done to not only help Elena grow, but also to help herself rediscover who she truly was. It had been a long journey, but it had brought Clara to a place where she could breathe freely, no longer burdened by things she could not change. In the past year, Clara's life had changed in many ways, and although she still remembered the things of the past, she knew that now she could live for herself. The difficult and challenging times had taught Clara valuable lessons about love, sacrifice, and the strength of living for oneself. And with Elena's letter, Clara knew that she no longer had to endure alone. Both she and Elena had grown in their own ways, and in the end, mother and daughter would find their path to happiness. Throughout the challenging journey that Clara has experienced, from unconditional sacrifice to rediscovering herself, she learned an important lesson. Healing only comes when we learn to let go. Clara not only helped Elena grow, but also found strength and joy in living for herself. This is not a story of revenge or grudges that never fade, but rather a journey of finding freedom from past wounds. The truth is, sometimes difficult decisions are the way we reclaim control over our own lives. Through each page, we see that Clara is not only a loving mother, but also a strong woman who dared to stand up and change to live true to herself. Elena, though initially struggling, ultimately realized the value of independence and the lessons her mother had tried to impart. And that is what truly matters. Both mother and daughter have found their own paths to maturity. If this story has touched your heart, don't hesitate to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your reflections will be an encouragement for stories like this to continue being told, spreading values of forgiveness, growth, and unconditional love. We all deserve to be loved and live for ourselves. Thank you for joining Clara on this healing journey.